So I'm sold. Epicureanism, I think, is better than Stoicism.
We've all been to undergrad, grad school, put our toes into every philosophy there is. And it happens, we're coming to right now, January 2026, we've figured it out.
Yeah, it's weird. Stoicism is so popular, but then, I mean, I guess the reason I was trying to think, like, you know, when I was reading this, I was trying to imagine, like, why isn't there a revival of like self-help books that are Epicurean as opposed to Stoic? Like, why is Stoicism getting all the attention?
Well, Eric, you converted to Stoicism last episode. So are you switching or is this?
Or are you sticking with it?
Did this not do it for you?
No, I'm going to try it out first. Well, like I mentioned last time, Stoicism was a major inspiration behind the guy who came up with cognitive therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which are like the gold standard kinds of therapies, along with dialectical behavior therapy, which came from somewhere else. I haven't looked into the philosophical roots of that one. I think it's Stoicism's emotional control component that seemed to be the most inspiring. Yeah, I don't have any plans of. I think Stoicism, like the data that they've gathered after having run this Stoicism Week thing for like 10 years plus, seems to be pretty positive. And again, like, I think there's a lot of elements of like a pan-therapeutic effect where if you're just really reflecting on your moods and paying more attention to yourself, and like you're going to get benefits anyway. And like Stoicism may just be one route to that. But I don't know, like it does Epicureanism have that sort of self-care kind of element to it? Like,
yes. I think it does.
Even that Foucault kind of saw in Stoicism, it seemed later in his career, he seemed to like be inspired to go on that care for the self direction with Stoicism.
I don't know what it is, but our audience, whenever we bring up CBT, which I think I don't know what it is even. You guys talk about it every time. There's a very passionate discourse in the comments about some people who hate CBT and some people who think it's. I don't know if anyone extols it like unreservedly, but everyone's got a strong opinion on CBT and the other one, dialectical something.
Oh, DBT, yeah.
All right, so there's opinions.
Well, how does that one come out?
People want to defend it, I think. Yeah.
DBT is like an alternative. I don't know.
When we're comparing the therapy schools, the Greek philosophy schools are basically having the same argument, which philosophy, which method is best. It's just that their therapies also come with an entire cosmology and like an ordering of the human person along with it.
Yeah.
I want to make a claim that I think Epicureanism and Stoicism are not totally incompatible. I think Stoics will want to reject a lot of things Epicureans say, but I feel like Epicureans would not necessarily reject everything that the Stoic says. Especially when it comes to conduct, like human well-being. Like I felt I was struck by the fact that it seems to me like they want similar outcomes. I felt like I was reading the Epicurean case for happiness as a kind of tranquility to be not that dissimilar than like what the Stoics say matters. It's just that obviously the way that they get there are very different. And certainly the thing that I liked much more about Epicureanism is, again, they emphasize relationality and friendship and other people. And I think that that's a huge plus for the Epicurean school.
I think Epicureanism is logically correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, like some Stoics were partly Epicurean. I don't think they're too different.
Well, they disagree on the virtues, and we can get into the things they disagree on in detail. Yeah. But let me say this: all of practical philosophy, whether it's Christian or Stoic or Buddhist or Epicureanism or even the Platonists, really, all of them agree that if you train your mind to control your desires, you'll be happier. And if the other way around, you won't be happy. So 3,000 years of philosophy, all our years of studying some shit in grad school, all you actually need is your mind to control your desire, or to put it in other terms, if you set your mind to giving negative feedback on desire instead of positive feedback, this is what the wisest people have all agreed is how to be happy.
Yeah, I agree. So it's not just Stoicism and Epicureanism that are compatible in that way. You're right. It's like the whole history of moral, ethical, practical thinking. You're right. I think they all converge on some version of that. They obviously disagree with the underlying metaphysics or epistemology that make that possible, and therefore also probably disagree about some of the methods. But I think you're right. They agree on that outcome, or on that being the goal, to like temper your desires.
We kind of agree generally about like the outcome that should be happening, but like nobody agrees how to get there, and everyone fights passionately defending their point of view and how they think they should get there. How to get to tranquility, how to get to emotional stability, or whatever, the eudaimonia, happiness, or flourishing. Probably better, because happiness implies like a psychological state, which none of them are talking about.
The goal of Epicureanism is what they call ataraxia, where taraxia means disturbances and a means no disturbances. So it's translated tranquility, but that's the goal, is a state of peace. Being
at ease in yourself, in your body, in who you are.
Yeah, peace of mind might be a good translation.
Being comfortable in your own skin, being comfortable with just not worrying as much, right? I think like all those things are related as like an absence of disturbance, right? Which to me makes sense. I feel like I feel like Stoicism is worried about that too.
Well, this was one difference that I noticed, is that Epicureanism seems to be decided that like participation in politics and the life of the polis is like a no-go. Like you should live a kind of withdrawn life. And Stoicism is actually divided on this question. Which is another difference I'll get to, is that Epicureanism is slightly more on the dogmatic side, or some make that claim. So Stoics are divided on whether participating in politics is like okay, something that should be part of the teachings, and I think the general answer is like yes, as long as it doesn't compromise virtue, which is the most important thing, and is training up that virtue that we mentioned last time. But for the Epicureans, right, it's more about withdrawing from politics and kind of living the simple life. Epicurus himself actually had his school outside the city walls, and there's the famous Epicurean garden there. They had the academy, the lyceum, the garden, and I guess just the barrel. If you're a cynic, you're just living in the barrel wherever you are.
And the porch.
Yeah, the Stoa, some places called the Stoa, where the Stoics got their name from.
Epicurus is the most woke. He let women come to the garden.
Yeah,
that's true. I heard that.
It was egalitarian.
If you're on the porch, how do you stop? Like if women are walking by, you're like, move on, lady. Like, are they not allowed to listen? You're just out in public.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, probably the difference was they could listen, but they can't participate, right? Whereas an Epicurean they probably could.
No, Stoicism did permit women as well. They were also they were semi-woke. Was it Musonius? Here's a line from our last reading. Musonius Rufus argued in his lectures that because young girls have the capacity to reason just as well as young boys, they too should receive a full education in philosophy. That's from Discourse 4. In all the ways that matters most, there is no difference between men and women. As a consequence, it is equally appropriate for women to become philosophers as it is for men. That is an argument put forward by Musonius Rufus, who was the teacher of Epictetus, I believe. And Epictetus is one of the big three later Stoics whose work actually survives.
Cool. I did want to go back to the point about withdrawing from public life, because that also stood out to me as very interesting. And I was sort of thinking about it you know, you could think about it as a normative claim, or you could think about it as a descriptive claim. And I think I'm very sympathetic to it as a descriptive claim, in the sense that participating in like politics is probably going to make you unhappy. Like going and trying to like, I mean, we all know it. It's like if you withdraw from Twitter, withdraw from like political arguments, like being involved in those is bad for your mental health. So like as a descriptive claim, I just think that that's 100% right. Like it's not going to be good for you. As a moral claim, as a normative claim, like obviously there's going to be circumstances where you need to participate in politics. So I'm not for that. But I think like from just the psychological claim, I mean, that doesn't seem that crazy to me. And I actually appreciate it as kind of a counter, which even sort of dovetails into some of the work that I've done, even in my dissertation and stuff, that, you know, these views of democracy or politics that sort of glorify like the meeting, the council as these important parts of like a good life. Like I've always been skeptical of those. I'm like, that's bullshit. Like people going to those things is a pain in the ass. Like it's, you know, it's not like some beautiful thing. The outcome is beautiful. The work that it does could be beautiful, but like the actual thing itself is a pain in the ass. And then I guess the final thing I would say about it though, is I do think it might expose a tension in the ideal of like the Epicurean community. And that just to me raises a question of, well, how do you make those communities work without politics? Like, I don't understand it. Like, how are you guys deciding things? Like it's going to be unavoidable. So I don't know if there was an answer to that I missed, but I was just curious. Like these communities are withdrawing from the city, but internally they must have, maybe they remain small enough that it's like not a big deal to figure those things out. And like maybe the kind of politics he has in mind is like at the scale of the city or bigger, which sucks. And, you know, is right about that. So that was interesting. And that's kind of how I processed that claim.
Well, there are no commandments, obviously, in Epicureanism.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that says don't do politics. It's more like if you're going to dedicate your life to politics, this is most likely going to make you unhappy.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're trying to climb the ladder to I don't know, whatever the Greek equivalent of that. If you're trying to get famous and powerful, that leads to unhappiness.
Yeah. So that's why I read it more as a descriptive claim. Exactly.
But it's not retreating from the polis in terms of being ascetic or like living in a cult, because you need Epicurus is pretty clear. You need money also to be happy. You just need not as much money as you think. You don't go for money's sake. You go for money for food's sake.
Yeah.
No, I think the Cynics like rejected society sort of.
Yeah.
Not even like ascetically, but just like almost in like a Rousseauian kind of way. Is just like, no, society is corrupting. And I think that's probably the view of politics too, is, you know, like I said, for the Stoics too, right? Like participate in politics insofar as it does not compromise your virtue. And we all know politics can be extremely compromising for the development, right? It often requires you to be cutthroat and immoral and lie and not cultivate your better virtues anyway, the character virtues.
And it can also make you obsessed with some things that like don't actually matter that much from the perspective, like prestige and like these different things that
popularity, everything that matters in
all
politics.
These things that don't really matter. Yeah.
So let's set up the comparison here. For the Stoics, to be happy, you need virtue. You live the virtuous life. You find virtue in nature, which is, again, much more expansive than the way we use it. But your nature is your fate. If you fight
living
fate,
in
you'll be
accordance
unhappy.
with nature.
If you live in accordance with nature, you'll live and die happy. Even if you have nothing and no one with you, your happiness is there to be found. Epicureanism, they say that happiness is found in pleasure. That's it. Very simple. It's hedonistic. But like we use the word stoicism wrong, the way we use stoicism means like someone without emotion. Hedonism does not mean sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It literally just means the pursuit of pleasure.
The British are at fault for that, because the British version of hedonism is the way that people think of hedonism, but it's not like that.
Like also the term of materialism, what that tends to mean too, like being obsessed with material things. Like, we're all modern consumer culture running on that hedonic treadmill, waiting for the next iPhone to come out, and that's the only thing that makes you happy. No, like, put all of that out of your
None of that
mind.
would apply. In fact, as Pills just said, like, trying to chase those material things would be a path to unhappiness for the Epicurean.
Yeah, if there's anything banned in Epicureanism, it's chasing fame and fortune.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they say this will carry out in your actions. Really, it doesn't matter what you believe at all.
And it's not even banned. It's just like, be aware that that's actually like, you're just increasing your likelihood of misery if you keep doing that. Like,
there's no benefit to fame and fortune, because also another reason is they can't be limited. You can always seek more fame. You can always seek more money. Whereas the natural desires like food, when you're full, you can't eat anymore. So it's not an infinite waste. But yeah, happiness and the highest happiness, this is the highest goal. It's not a sage. It's not a person. The highest point of happiness is called, I said it already, ataraxia.
Yeah, being at ease, at peace.
And it means being free of pain. So the highest pleasure is not feeling pain. And not physical pain, right? So the main pains that you feel, the most intense pains you feel are fear and regret and anxiety. He says the mental pains, they can last forever because you can never be free of it until you deal with it. So physical pleasure, physical pain, they're there, but you can basically get over it. But the main point of Epicureanism is to free yourself from the pain of regret. The fear of death is a big one. And the fear of the gods, which he constantly brings up. This must have been a big issue, but he says that the only purpose of the gods, they're made up by a corrupt society. Well, actually,
to make you feel shitty.
Technically, he doesn't say they're made up, but all the rules around them, they are made up to make you feel shitty. So one of the first things you got to do is get rid of religion. And down the road, Christianity would basically stamp out Epicureanism for some pretty obvious reasons.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. It also strikes me, one thing that struck me when you were talking there, Pills, is how this ataraxia, am I saying that right? This kind of like absence of pain. It reminds me of like the way modern times we talk about privilege, right? Like something like white privilege. And people are like, oh, you don't notice your privilege. You just like, you realize that you're at ease in a space. It's like, I can go into a store and feel comfortable, right? For example, if you're a white person or whatever. And it strikes me that this account of like absence of pain, we could compare it conceptually to that, because it's like an absence of worrying, right? Because the thing that makes white privilege good isn't that white people are like, oh my God, I'm enjoying my white privilege so much. This is so great. It's the fact that they don't have to worry about things, which is the good part, right? It's not some additive. It's actually a subtractive in a way. It's like, I don't have to think about how people are looking at me when I'm in a space, right? And I think in a way that's, you want to expand that to all parts of your life. And that's, I feel like, in a way, like the Epicurean good.
Yeah. I found there's this dope quote from 1770 by a materialist named Baron Tolbach, who wrote a text called The System of Nature, 1770. And this just reminded me of what you were saying about the getting rid of the gods part of Epicureanism. It's like, the quote runs something like, if we go back to the beginning, we shall find that ignorance and fear created the gods, that fancy, enthusiasm, or deceit adorned them, that weakness worships them, that credulity preserves them, and that custom, respect, and tyranny support them. And I think Epicureanism was one of the main. I mean, maybe we'll do another like legacy thing later, but I just thought that was a badass quote to bring forward.
Epicurus says, if the gods exist, you're not going to be hearing from them, because if the gods who we think they are, then they're happy. And if they're happy, they're not going to pester us. And if they exist, they're also made of atoms. They're atomists. So everything's made of atoms, including the gods. They're not special, in other words. They're not special, and if they are happy, you're never even going to hear from them. So they're kind of like agnostic with respect to debating that. But what he cares about with respect to the gods is their main purpose seems to be coercing obedience out of people or making people afraid that they're doing the right thing. Are they being obedient to God or not? Are they going to go to hell after they die? I don't know what all the Greek equivalents to these things are, but in our terminology, God causes a lot of anxiety. This is kind of the inverse of the Calvinist. The Calvinist is so worried about whether he's going to heaven or not that he works his ass off his whole life just with the vain hope that somehow he'll squeak by. And the Epicurean works as little as possible because it's a waste of time and waste of happiness, and tries to be at peace in the here and now.
Well, the Calvinists kind of like Stoicism too because of the fatalism there, whereas Epicureanism has the famous swerve idea, the clinomen, the swerve, where atoms will just sort of completely randomly by pure absolute chance diverge from their path, that they will dissent from the path that they're on, just like at random, which is a kind of, they'll follow. I think the way I heard that is it'll follow their inclinations, and the inclinations of matter can just like take random turns and swerve, which is a little bit like what following pleasure is about following the intrinsic like paths things want to take, their inclinations, as opposed to like psychological pleasure again and psychological happiness, although psychological hedonism is what this book calls Epicurus' position. But I think it has to do with inclination, because what we get right, I see here, one of the main differences between Epicureanism and Aristotle is the rejection of telos, that things have a purpose, which is another one of those, like, I think you were saying earlier, like, oh my God, this is so like correct. Like it's so modern sounding. Like it sounds like modern scientific materialism in the same way that it rejects teleological explanations and purposes. And the idea that everything is like striving towards this wholeness, which is what the kind of root of telos is in Aristotle, like a wholeness that things are kind of moving towards an end, a whole, and fulfilling a kind of purpose within that whole. Epicureanism does not. That dismisses that entirely, saying no, telos is nothing for us. Things don't have purpose.
Which sounds very modern. Well, they weren't right about everything. Like, it's not true that sour foods taste sour because there's tiny little barbs in the food that stab our tongues.
It's a good theory.
Yeah, no, and our understanding of atoms, the secondary sources are like, oh, they were atomists and they were right. Like, no, they were not at all. Their understanding of atoms was like fire atoms are these tiny little triangles, and like earth atoms are tiny little squares. Like,
yeah, they were only broadly pointing in a roughly right direction, but they were very wrong about all the details.
They were accidentally right. Yeah. But this thing called Swerve, which sounds like Zoomer TikTok slang. Everything's got some swerve.
#Swerve.
Says the new rapper Little Skizzer or whatever. Anyway, yeah, they're basically, their universe is basically deterministic. There's all these little atoms that are flying in their own direction, which is pure determinism, except then every once in a while there's a swerve where they go to the left or to the right. They're still going in the same direction, but there's a little bit of like randomness, I guess you'd call it. And you could say then it's a soft determinism instead of a hard determinism. So it's because atoms can move spontaneously that we have the ability to change our lives, I guess. So there's an account of where our freedom comes from. But I know I hate when people do this, by the way, but it sounds so much like the double slit experiment. Like you know where the beam starts, you know where it ends, but you don't know which way they got to get there. They weren't right about it. I'm just saying. It's just a parallel, an accidental parallel.
Well, yeah, I've heard many times, like Epicureanism leaves room for free will, like true free will, because of this swerve thing, but it is very unclear how you get from the clinomen to like human free will. There's no obvious path from like A to B there.
It's like Deepak Chopra or those all the new age guru grifters who are like, well, there's an observer in quantum physics that changes reality. So if you talk to your plants, then they're going to grow greener. And if you think about money, it has no choice except to arrive in your bank account.
Yeah, or like your brain is quantumly entangled with the whole universe. Like, yeah, okay.
Can we also bring to the forefront what I thought was maybe the most appealing, especially in contrast to Stoicism, was the importance of relationality. I think is very appealing. You know, he talks about friendship being crucial. At one point, I think the author quotes, if not Epicurus, then someone else who was a follower of Epicurus, saying that, you know, we should even love our friends, like that there's more pleasure in like loving your friends than loving yourself or something like that. And in a way, I was thinking as I was reading that, you know, kind of the British liberal individualist version of hedonism, we might call like rational egoism, right? It's like just worried about yourself. This almost sounded like rational collectivism in a weird sense. It's like do things that benefit like your collective connections the most, and that's going to be a way of cementing and securing that kind of tranquility that you have, that having relations to other people both materially and emotionally secures your tranquility and your ease of mind. And it seems like for the Stoic, they would almost say, well, you can just get over not having friends. You can just, you know, this I liked, and I think it's an interesting contrast.
Yeah, all these porn addicted 18-year-olds are in the Discord trying out Stoicism. They should be on Epicureanism.
Yeah, exactly.
I was wondering if you're going to bring this up. I mean, I knew you were going to bring this up. But it's interesting that the reason to have friends is not any like good in itself. Like it might be for Plato at the Symposium. It's like
still rationalistic. Yeah.
You need to have a network because at the end of the day, this is more likely to make you happy in the future. So it's
exactly.
kind of,
yeah, it's true.
It's a little bit, what would we call it? Instrumental, but I mean,
yeah, it's instrumental.
That's true, right? It's true. Not sentimental.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not sentimental. It's not intrinsic. And that's why I think that maybe like rational collectivism is like not a bad way of describing it, because it is like rationalistic, instrumental, in a similar way that like rational egoism is kind of individualistic. It is about your future well-being, but it goes far, right? It goes really far in the sense that, you know, it was striking to me again that he's saying that well, yeah, I don't know. I maybe I'll need to take a look at that section again, but it's interesting that he talks about how there can be more pleasure in enjoying the well-being of your friend than even in yourself, like that. And that's not, I don't think he's trying to say that in some sentimentalist way, like you said, Pills. It is almost coming from a place, that like maybe there's a pleasure. I need to check again in like enjoying your friends. That is like a distinct kind of pleasure. And maybe this is a good way of leading into the conversation about the way that the Epicureans divide up the types of pleasure.
My aunt had a little poster in her bathroom that I remember when I was little, and it had two little kittens on it. And it said, trouble shared is trouble halved. Joy shared is joy doubled. So that's the Epicureanism
right
principle.
There. that is. Yeah, it's true.
Epicureanism operates within a kind of Aristotelian ethical framework. And we do know that Aristotle makes a big deal out of friendships. And one of the things we learned about the difference between Stoicism was, yeah, Victor's right. Stoicism really like doesn't emphasize friendship as super important alongside virtues on the pathway to happiness. Stoicism doesn't. Like, I guess one of the outcomes would be like you're pleasant and a friendly person, like easy to get along with if you're like the Stoic on the way towards sage like qualities. But like, yeah, friendship's not essential.
Don't they even go further, the Stoics, and say, like, wouldn't they say that your dependence on friendship is an illusion, and that if like you could just figure out that all you need is yourself and your virtue, and that like if you are overly dependent on friends, that that's like one of their lies or like falsities, right? It's like that's just not true. Like the source of your virtue is internal. You don't actually need anyone.
Your happiness shouldn't be dependent on them, but they're not going to say don't have friends.
No, I agree. They're not going to say don't have friends, but they're going to say, but if you think that it's like that your happiness depends on it, that's an illusion. They would say.
Seneca, I think Seneca comments in one of his letters that he has no time he doesn't care about the meaning of the word friend. He's only interested in guidance for how to treat his friends. So I guess in the sense that like friendship can be a source of like difficulty, then.
Well, let's say all the things that hedonism in this case is not, because it's better to get all the junk out of the way. Hedonism is not wanting stuff, because your stuff, if you have a lot of it, you're at risk of it being stolen from you. That's going to produce anxiety. That's why you want a lot of friends, but not a lot of stuff. I guess your friends can't be stolen from you in this example. You need variety in your life. Variety is a form of pleasure. So it's not, this is a reason to not eat like the same food all the time. Either bread or steak. Even if you're rich, you don't want to eat steak every day, because if you eat steak every day, it gets boring and you're not going to get pleasure out of it. So you need a bit of variety. That's why it's best to eat bread like 6 days a week and have steak one day on the weekends to make it special. Like one of the problems he's dealing with basically is that there's diminishing returns. There's diminishing returns from being bored of something. So you want to be okay with the simple things enough so that when you get something special, then it's noteworthy. Then you can actually get pleasure out of it. If you need luxury at all times, then you're going to have a very hard time getting pleasure out of anything in your life. The other thing is, Epicurus says we might desire things that we shouldn't. However, in Epicureanism, you're never prohibited by moral law. It's never because God said that you can't drink that you shouldn't drink. It's because if you drink too much, you're going to get sick from it. You're going to get sick the next day. You're going to have a bad liver. But what it is to be rational and what it is to be human, therefore, is to be able to plan in advance, to want the general health overall, not the pleasure in the moment. So you have to look to the future.
Yeah.
Like if your doctor prescribes you OxyContin, it's going to stop your pain now, but the risks are too great of it causing unhappiness that you should probably, not take it. And other examples are you should experience pain now if you want to have pleasure later. So the main example for that is working out. So yeah, it hurts to work out, you're tired, but overall, it's going to be better for you. You're going to be happier being more fit because it's easier to open doors and pick your kid up.
And healthy, long-term health.
One thing I thought was interesting here is society corrupts because there's three types of desire. Those that are necessary and natural, those ones you should never inhibit yourself. That's food, shelter, friendships, family. You should never prevent yourself from having those, which is in contrast to ascetics or Christians or like things that say you should fast to get yourself closer to God. You should starve yourself.
All those losers.
There's no point. It doesn't make you better to do any of those things. The second kind of desire is natural but not necessary. So this would be sex, expensive food. It's natural to want expensive food, but you don't really need it. Now, natural but not necessary, you should do, but in
moderation.
Right. In moderation. And you need to do natural but not necessary desires, give in to them just to increase the variety. Like you can survive on eating rice or bread every single day, but you're not going to be very happy doing that. So you got to spice it up with natural but not necessary desires, even if it's unhealthy, as long as it's not too often.
It was interesting when he talked about, sorry if you're not done, continue.
There's only three types of desire. That's natural and necessary, natural but not necessary. That you should engage in moderation. Recreational drug use, all of that goes into natural but not necessary. Mm-hmm. But then the third category is vain and empty. Mm-hmm. And vain desire, what classifies it, is that it has no limit. So this is where you find the esteem of others, or public esteem, or fame, or celebrity, or money, or wealth, or yeah, you think of anything else?
And politics. Well, that's where the political realm is. I think that's why he worries about the political realm.
Power would fit into there too. Anything
Power,
that you're
fame,
not,
wealth,
anything that can never satisfy you, that you only need more. This is only going to make you unhappy.
Maybe like sleeping with a lot of people, like as much as you can. That could be like a kind of vain.
Yeah. Well, I think sex would be natural, but not necessary.
Sex, right. But maybe there's a separate category of like being attached to the identity of like being like a player or something like that, right? That's like a kind of vainglorious thing that goes with it.
You have sex not even because you want to, just because you're trying to add to your body count. That's, yeah.
Your exploits. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So 3, that kind of desire you never need. Number 1, the type of desire, you should never limit yourself. Like if you're hungry, eat. There's no benefit to fasting. I mean, unless there is a physical benefit to fasting. There's there's no moral benefit to fasting. And I thought that was just like, that's how you do it. That's how you do it.
Seems right. I mean, yeah, exactly. It seems totally right. I also wanted to quickly highlight when he talks about mental pleasures, because that was interesting to me, right? Now, I don't know if he thinks that these, like where these mental pleasures fit into the 3 that you mentioned there, but you know, for example, like remembering really happy things. There's actually an example where apparently when Epicurus himself was dying, so he actually had a pretty painful, horrible death from like kidney stones, like really uncomfortable. He was in a lot of pain. And he apparently one of the letters he wrote to his friend is he said, even now I remain, what sustains my happiness is thinking about all the great philosophical conversations I had with my friends. And like, that is like
nerd.
Giving me, yeah, I know, what a nerd. But that was kind of interesting to me, like having like enjoying memories or anticipating future things that you're looking forward to. And I don't know how Pills, how do you think those fit into like natural, necessary, etc.?
Well, he says basically ignorance is not bliss. So I think you need. There's some amount of thought. I don't know if you'd necessarily say philosophy, but there's some amount of thought that is necessary, some amount of memories that are necessary. But then you can also move them in. Like if you're too obsessed with philosophy and all you want to talk about is philosophy all the time to the point that you annoy other people.
I know people like that.
Now you start causing pain. Or if you like your happy memories so much that you become nostalgic and it prevents you from acting. Now you're drifting into natural but not necessary. So you need to, everything in moderation. It's the most basic.
Which again is like Eric said, it's, you know, it does give Aristotelian virtues, which is maybe just a very ancient Greek way of thinking about things. I did want to mention though, like this is reminding me, to contrast Epicureanism with Aristotelian ethics is I think
they disagree.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the role of telos, right? Of teleology. Because for Aristotle, it seems like these things like have a proper place, like an appropriate place. So even though they seem to functionally agree, it seems like for Epicurus, there is no telos to like our bodies or our natural things. Like there's not really, I think I had a note on it somewhere here. Like he just doesn't think that there's any like telos to our organism. There's only a state of this ataraxia, this kind of like ease, but it's not because that's like naturally best. Like because for him the universe is kind of a chaotic place, right? It's not like there's no such thing as some proper. I'm just trying to find it. Oh yeah, okay. So I think Epicurus I think agrees, right, that the highest good is in a way happiness and like the quality of your life, this being at ease. But Aristotle thinks that our organs have a purpose, right? That our hands have a purpose, that like that all these things have a rational purpose. And I think Epicurus rejects that. He's like, there's no inherent purpose to organs or human beings. We're just floating, the atoms bouncing together in the universe. And instead he pivots this discussion of inherent teleology to, I think, just a descriptive account of desire, right? Like, what are the things that we desire and what leads to this like appealing place of like ataraxia, of being at ease, being tranquil. It's maybe a bit of a subtle distinction, but it's like a claim that has to do with the metaphysics, right? Of like what the truth of the universe is. I might have missed something, so I don't know if if either of you wanted to add or help clarify that.
That sounds right to me. But although there's a few things that he does do that Aristotle would be very upset by. One is basically Epicurus says the only virtue that really matters is prudence, and prudence should guide all the other ones. Whereas Aristotle has all these balances. So prudence is just like, if it works, if it's going to work better, then it's the right thing to do. There's no like proper immaterial natural balance based on like the ousia and final causality. There's no such thing as predetermined outcomes because everything is matter in motion. So we have to be empirically practical about what we're going to do. The one of courage, right? Courage is like you have to die for your city if your city calls on you, and do it bravely. And Epicurus is like, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Like there's no benefit to courage if it means you die for someone else telling you to die. There's no value to that virtue.
I mean, there might be prudential reasons to defend the city, right? Which Epicurus would be fine with, right? Yeah. But
Epicurus actually says, like, if you're going to go and display bravery, this is good because you might get land. Like the Lord might give you land for going to fight and showing bravery. But if you're going to for sure die, you for sure should run away. Like this is what would be cowardice in the Nicomachean ethics. But no, he's like, if you're going to die anyway, don't have a glorious death. Get out of there.
Yeah.
Well, this is part of my problem with Epicureanism is it is kind of like a calculus of pleasure. Like the only reason that you shouldn't participate in some kind of pleasure, like shooting up heroin or like playing with matches because it's fun, and the only reason you should do things that are painful, like getting a root canal or, I don't know, like passing a kidney stone or having loads of kids and undergoing birth pains, is because of the long-term benefits, right? It's like a maximizing the pleasure in the long run. That's why prudence is the only important thing, because you have to have this foresight to see like whether choosing this pleasure now is going to be consistent with like maximizing the pleasure in your lifetime, which is kind of the annoying part, I think, to think about with Epicureanism. Like this is why Cicero attacks it here, and he mentions like Cicero's complaints about Epicureanism, right? Where because pleasure is really the only thing that they care about, right? Like you I don't know, you run into these problems, and
but pleasure not in the sense of additive though, right? I think that's the thing that makes it a bit more subtle, is like the pleasure that you're after is actually this kind of absence of, it's just being at ease, being at peace. It's not really like, it's not trying to gather more pleasures in the sense of like the British, hedonists.
But it still lines up with like
hedons.
Kind of, it still does line up with the general idea of like seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, though. Like,
and it is rationalistic.
Minimize
it is
the pain.
But what I don't understand the objection.
Well, because it has a kind of calculus to it.
Instead of what?
The idea that you could justify doing something compromising, like being a huge coward and running away because that's the right choice to maximize pleasure in the long run, or that you would participate. The only reason you would participate in anything meaningful, like fighting for your country or joining a protest or anything, is because it would maximize the pleasure for you and your immediate like comrades around you. It seems to me still kind of, there's like, it seems like beyond a small group of people that you know directly, there's a kind of moral bankruptcy to it.
Okay,
no, but I think
wait. There's a rebuttal. Epicureans think that they can undermine all the other rival philosophies because they all have the definition of what's going to make you happy and the good, right? For Plato, the good is the highest form. The Stoics think virtue is the highest good. Christians or Muslims will probably think like obedience to God is the highest good. And the Epicureans think that pleasure is the highest good. But the Epicureans think all of these other people, they're actually doing it to maximize pleasure. They're just putting a different name on it. If you're obedient to God, it's because you think that God's going to give you a better life or a better afterlife. If you're seeking virtue as the highest good, it's because you think that's the thing that's going to make you have the least pain, right? That's the point of avoiding relationships that can, of people that can hurt you. So they're all doing the same thing as Epicureans, according to the Epicureans. The Epicureans are just saying, we're doing it honestly. We're saying that we're doing this for pleasure. You say you're doing it for God or telos or
principles or
virtue.
Yeah, that's a pretty good response, I think.
There is a sense in which all of that, you're categorizing different kinds of pleasures. You're saying, because Epicureans would accept the idea that like what's pleasurable for me is not pleasurable for you. And what's pleasurable now might lead to pain later, like obviously like shooting up heroin. Like they would completely accept all of those things and say, no, you have to direct your efforts towards things that are like sustainably pleasurable and not destructive in the long run. And then you have to realize that nothing is intrinsically pleasurable. Like just like what I said, what's sauce for the gander, whatever the saying is. Like what's pleasurable for me is not pleasurable for you.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Yeah, that's the one.
I like sauce for the gander better.
Something like that. Yeah, they would accept all those things. Yeah. And I think even Aristotle, who would turn towards intellectual virtue as more on the higher side, right? Like the intellectual.
So do the Epicureans, though, don't they?
Yeah, and it's a source of pleasure. Contemplating pure contemplation of the forms of things is a pleasure in itself. It's just that yes, okay. So there you go. You can see it. You can be a little bit cynical and just say, yeah, that they're all just looking for that like enduring source of pleasure. Okay, but the Epicureans would definitely reject like eternal forms, because for them it's all material. There are no forms separate from the matter in which they inhere, and everything is changeable.
What a relief.
Yeah, there's no eternal forms. Like they would be complete, like Kant would be not an Epicurean, because the Kantian ethic is completely different in its sense of like being reason-based.
Well, he's trying to do something insane, which is locate pure practical reason, meaning practical reason that is totally devoid of any feeling and is just purely
what's like
rational.
Universal validity would be, Epicureans would be like, huh?
Well, they'd be like, that doesn't exist. They would just be like, that's not possible.
Yeah.
Which I kind of agree with.
We could talk about politics in an Epicurean sense. Like if you, current issues, if you object to your government bombing other people, that's a source of pain for you, right?
Yeah.
So you go to protest to not because you are morally obligated to, but because showing your displeasure with something being done on your behalf, that brings you pleasure.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, it assuages your guilty conscience because that's what your country is doing on your behalf. But whether or not it accomplishes something is not really at issue. No one protests for that reason. What matters is that you feel, okay, I've been seen, I have been heard. And if anyone asks, they know I'm not a part of this. That's the thing you're receiving pleasure from. Maybe you have more vain motives and you're just trying to get on TV. But at minimum, you're assuaging the pain you feel at being responsible for what your country's doing. Because you're not stopping the bombs in all likelihood, but at least you can sleep at night. So that's a win. No problem with that.
Yeah, you're showing you're expressing disapproval.
Now, if you're in so much pain and you have convinced yourself or you believe that there's only one way to alleviate how much pain you're in, and that's to go out in public and light yourself on fire. Now, it's a little bit harder to justify as an Epicurean, but not impossible. So the first reason is that they say there's no point in being afraid of death. Death is nothing to fear. It's just the end of fear. It's the end of pain or pleasure.
Yeah, exactly.
But there is sort of a pleasure involved, and the pleasure is something like the idea of dying a hero or the idea of dying a meaningful death. maybe having faith that you'll be remembered. Now, to be clear, for an Epicurean, all of these are irrational because you'll never get to experience the cost benefit. You'll never get to experience that because you're dead. So you're dying with zero empirical basis. But even so, it's not precluded.
It's not. I agree. I kind of think almost nothing is precluded. But I think what the Epicurean might wonder about someone who does that is what's going on in that person's life that they want to do that, right? Like maybe that person should examine like the balance of things in their life that causes them to want to do that. I feel like.
But then there'd be a healthy dose of the idea that like pleasure is relative to the experiencer. So it could be the case that they get pleasure out of it truly. It could be the case that they're masochistic and or just, doing it because they want to look a certain way. I mean, the same person who experiences pain at the idea of their country bombing another country, someone else, might experience kind of pleasure, a patriotic, nationalistic, jingoist joy in their country attacking another country and winning.
Yeah, that's true. You can't really say things or you can't really evaluate things based on their morality or immorality.
Right. It's all, and I like prudence. I like that this is that's the only virtue. It kind of it makes sense to me.
Isn't that a source of something to be worried about with endorsing Epicureanism? Is a kind of moral bankruptcy when it comes to pleasure being the ultimate good?
No. If you take pleasure in your government dropping bombs somewhere else, this already proves you're extremely fucked up. However, it's not because it's immoral. It's because if you live in such a fake imaginary world that you think something happening on the other side of the world that's not even good, but more that has nothing to do with you at all, that has no effect on you, and that you didn't plan to put your stock, your feeling and desire into that's what's fucked up. It's like saying I'm not happy, but I would be if I won the lottery, and walking around with that belief all day. If it's wholly distinct from nature or necessity, and you believe that makes you happy, you're doomed. You lived in a fucked up society and you're fucked up.
Like if even being ethical and acting morally is only good because it's a source of pleasure for the one acting in that way, like what does that say? I don't know. It does seem. Is there a rebuttal for that kind of to say that's okay? That's pure hedonism. To say that even the good is only good insofar as it's pleasurable.
Yeah. But they go even further than that. They say positing the good as this otherworldly thing, that is also an act of pleasure. People follow morality to avoid pain, not because the thing out there is real, because there is no real moral good out there in the universe, because we've seen it all, and it's all atoms.
Well, like, I'm pretty sure the Stoics also were thoroughgoing materialists, but still had a sense of, well, a God. They just hadn't that there's a material God, and they had a sense of soul. It's just a material soul. Like the Stoics were thoroughgoing materialists, and they were also like fatalists and determinists. They didn't have the swerve thing going, which seems to change a lot, which is to say that like you don't have control over your circumstances, and going against, I guess, an Epicurean reading, going against what fate has decreed is to be your lot is going to cause you a lot of anguish and pain, and you should avoid that by going with the flow. I don't know, but that seems a little bit different to me. That still doesn't say, pleasure is the highest good. That's now saying, okay, well.
I almost feel like using the English word pleasure as being the highest good is somehow misleading to what Epicureanism is really about.
Yeah, it sounds too horny. It does.
Yeah, it's not really right. That's not right. And I think it's an easy way for people who haven't read it to think that it's something that it's not,
Yeah, I was looking in the glossary and it's not defined in there. You have ataraxia, as Pills was saying, which is lack of mental turmoil, tranquility, or peace of mind, considered the limit of mental pleasure by the Epicureans.
Yeah, that's the highest good.
The primary constituent of the happy life. So the idea of something being the limit of mental pleasure. Okay, so I saw this about pain too. It's not like pain is bad. It's just pain is the limit. Pain marks out the point where pleasure stops. And that's the only thing that's not great about pain. Otherwise, you should do the painful thing if it's going to, have prudence, do the painful thing if it's going to result in a lot of pleasure. Like, don't avoid your problems just because it'll be painful to deal with them. Do deal with your problems, deal with that toothache because, it's going to cause you more pain in the future.
I feel like where the Stoics said that they were doing a consequentialist argument about what virtue is, like, this is what works, so this is what we have retroactively decided what virtue is. This is actually doing consequentialist ethics. There's nothing good or bad, but you'll find out. And you should pay attention to the wise people who have come before you and gave you advice, but you don't have to. Like, maybe they're wrong.
Figure it out for yourself. Be prudential.
Exactly. The ultimate Epicurean happiness is having a summer barbecue with the boys. Like, you don't drink too much. You don't eat too many hot dogs.
You have a reasonable amount of hot dogs, a reasonable amount of drinks.
And you don't get the cheapest hot dogs. You can have the good hot dogs. It's a Sunday. You have the boys over. But what else do you do in Epicureanism? It's like setting accomplishable goals, then you accomplish them, then you get new goals.
Having lots of lively conversation at the barbecue. As much of that as you can enjoy.
You should stress a little bit, but not too much. Not so much stress that you're always stressed and anxious. Be healthy now if you can. So don't have cigarettes at the barbecue. You'll thank yourself later, and get a good sleep whenever you can. This is like the Epicurean.
Pretty basic. And also, like, where there's overlap, I think, with the Stoics is, try to like sever yourself from worrying about things related to vanity, right? Like, for example, social media. Obviously, it didn't exist back then, but I think clear Epicurean advice would be, stop fixating on social media, probably because most of the people on social media don't even know you. So, like, you're letting these other people who aren't actually substantively in your life dictate your happiness and well-being. You shouldn't do that.
This is why you have to have a barbecue with the boys, because I don't think there's any Epicurean justification to have a wife and a kids and a mortgage. That's way too much potential for pain, stress, anxiety. You have to continue to work. You can never take time off. This is philosophy for the broskies. This is broski philosophy. Okay. Well, no, there is a reason to have kids and a wife and a mortgage. It's if your life is unbearable without it, or you think in the future it will be too lonely or unbearable.
But surely there's got to be some account of romantic good in Epicureanism, like love of a woman or of a significant other.
Yeah, for sure. But you're rolling the dice with like roping yourself into commitments that you don't know if you'll be able to keep or if they will.
It says here that everything has value either as a constituent of pleasure or a means to pleasure. So if it's either a constituent of one's pleasure or a means to pleasure, then it is good. And pleasure, it's not like this hedonistic sensualist pleasure. It's mental. I guess there's a distinction between bodily and mental pleasure.
And it's being at ease. It's not even additive. It's like just being relaxed. Just like,
Well, that's the thing. It's like pleasant. It's that it goes back to that living the simple life. It's like what's pleasant is, if it's pleasant, then it's good. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a way better word. Seeking pleasantness instead of pleasure.
Yeah, exactly.
That does get into weird, kind of, what's pleasing? That's very pleasing. I don't know.
But it's also, and that's why even that word is like slightly misleading, because it is very notable that this ataraxia or whatever it is the highest good, which is really just taking away disturbances, right? Like removing anything that preoccupies you, that stresses you out, that gives you anxiety, that gives you that makes you feel depressed, like taking away those things and then just being like, I'm chill. Like I feel fine. I'm at ease.
This is so anti-Kant.
It just feels like Grand Tour. I don't know. People who want to play Skyrim and see all the nice views and love the graphics and oh my God, this world is rendered so pleasantly and beautifully.
That's why pleasantness isn't right. Yeah, that's fine too. That's why pleasantness isn't the right word either.
If you like fighting, if you like jujitsu, it causes you pain, but it's good in the end, you know.
Or watching or reading a really sad novel that makes you cry. There's still a weird pleasure in that too. Like if you can handle it, you know.
Horror movies. What struck me by the end of this is how because he says, kind of like Rousseau, civilization, society corrupts you ultimately because of its values. And this is where we live, in the most anti-Epicurean society in history. There's no way for guys to have friends. That's why they're all addicted to porn and video games.
Well, that's perfect, because I was going to ask you, Pills, if you retract what you've been saying before, that everyone's an Epicurean.
Yes. Because they're not Stoics, they're not Platonists, they're not skeptics, but they are also not good Epicureans. They're very bad Epicureans.
Yeah.
Everyone believes that the pleasure is the good, but they're not doing the philosophy part of Epicureanism.
That's the thing. I think everyone's like a base, cringe, British Enlightenment hedonist.
Jesus.
But if you think of what he says, don't ever do vain and empty desires. If you think of our advertising, our politics, celebrity, social media, every single person knows all these things make you sad and depressed and anxious, and everyone does them.
And there's hours and hours of podcasts talking about that.
There's hours and hours of our podcast talking about things that don't make you happier. And there is a certain pleasure in it, right? There's a certain pleasure in dissection or understanding. And this is why even mathematics and philosophy, those are fun for certain people. Those are pleasant and pleasurable for certain people. And you should do it. You should do everything in moderation.
Yeah.
But if you had read this book and you're like, let's do everything the opposite. Let's be the least happy people. The people we talk about are unhappy. The people we see on TV, the people that make it in the society, they're vain and unhappy. The worst form of desire. We don't look for people who are happy to admonish. Happiness is not a goal. And the people who rule us are slaves to the most empty desires. We have all the information of everything that's ever happened in the universe, but no way for bros to make friends in real life.
Again, I can't believe I'd say it this way, but there'd be no room for that kind of martyrdom, that kind of self-sacrifice that is also important. You know, and from at least just from not even religious, from a social justice perspective, I guess you wouldn't have people oh God,
I think there's still room for it.
Gandhi, Mother Teresa, would they be Epicureans too? When you have this really strong moral sense, I feel like with the Epicurean position, okay, you're gonna have to accept things that, say, Rousseau says, right? Or even Freud and civilization and its discontents, right? You're operating on the pleasure principle, this sort of now, and you have to sort of civilization means you're repressing your instincts and desires in favor of a reality principle that allows you to get along with other people. I guess you still even in Freudian psychoanalysis, you still have this fundamental pleasure and pain driving you. And then you have the pleasure principle being suppressed in favor of the reality principle. And you have the idea that society is just bad. And that's why, Epicureans are don't participate in politics because it's not very pleasurable. Stoics being well, maybe participate in politics. Because,
but I think there's still room for all
that. It might
that.
compromise your virtue, and then like Rousseau and Freud being like, no, like society is fundamentally corrupting, and in nature we are good, and we can pursue our desires immediately without all of these complicated ways of having to channel our desires into creativity and all that bullshit. We can just go straight for them. But society, civilization doesn't let us. Does that the Epicurean lead to that kind of like?
No, I don't think so.
Anti-social.
I think there's still room. I think there's still room for all those things. Even before when we were talking about politics, I think there's still space for participating in politics. I mean, Pills even said there might even be space for self-immolation if you're, to free Palestine. So that which would be like a case of martyrdom. But I think what there's not room for is deluding yourself into thinking that it's like based on some higher principle, and it's more admitting and foregrounding the fact that there's a lot of jouissance and pleasure in like being a martyr or an activist, that you're kind of getting off on it. And it's like, if you're cool with that, if you're cool with admitting that, and also certainly they would be critical of people who not even critical, but they would just say there's something wrong with you if you let it like consume your life. And I don't even know. It's tough to say like whether they would condemn it, because I feel like they're not really in the business of morally condemning things. They would just be like, you seem kind of unhappy. Like you seem sad. Like you seem like you're not living a good life. Like it would be like descriptive. It would be diagnostic and descriptive. It's like your whole life is about, like being a Trotskyist in the street, talking to people all the day, trying to convince them. You seem kind of unhappy. Like your life seems a bit sad to me. But like if you want to do it, like go ahead, right? Like but I don't think they're going to be like, that's morally wrong what you're doing. I don't feel like they would say that.
Yeah, we Epicureans, we're probably not going to be the first one on the barricade, but it doesn't mean we're not going to be there.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
I just love this part though. Like here's part of what we read. As Aristotle puts it, he does them for the sake of to kalon, the noble or the fine, a person who behaves courageously, but does so only for the sake of the good consequences, and not because the action itself is noble and fine, is not truly courageous, but pseudo-courageous. Epicurus yields no ground before such high-minded criticisms, however, saying that he spits on the noble and on those who vainly admire it whenever it does not produce pleasure.
Amen, brother.
Like, oh, come on. That's a little bit, I mean...
It seems descriptively correct, though. That's the thing that I feel like I can't get over. Like, it's just
the guy who's self-immolating is not doing it because of a higher moral calling. He's doing it because he's just imagining in his head what he's going to look like on social media. Even though he's not going to be there to see it, he's going to be like, it's going to look pretty fucking good.
But that sounds worse than it is, though, because I think in the Epicurean worldview, there's still space. Like he genuinely is concerned about the people in Palestine suffering, right? Like that's giving him pain. Right. So I think there's still room for having that account. But yes, ultimately, it's like, yeah, what kind of message is this going to send?
Yeah, that's right. It depends. It depends the motivation. It depends on why he did it. But an Epicurean is never going to care why someone else did something either. So it's possible that an Epicurean could be like, you know what, I don't fear death because I'm a proper philosopher, and I think that this is like the best use of my energy is to burn myself alive. It's completely possible
yeah,
that an Epicurean makes that rational distinction. I doubt it. I don't know. I doubt it. They wouldn't do it diluted though. And this is kind of what I believe about Epicureanism is they say everyone else is deluded and we're doing this honestly. And then everyone starts yelling at them. No, we're not deluded. You're deluded. And they're like, yeah, fine, bro, whatever. I'm eating my burger.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm converted. I mean, not that I wouldn't even say that I'm converted because it's not like I was anything else, but I like it.
Well, as you could probably predict, Nietzsche appreciates elements of Epicureanism, but also ends up finding a life-denying aspect to it and a life-denying...
Of course he does.
Of course he does.
Resignation.
He's a psychopath. He's a psycho ascetic.
Yes, as he finds in everything, he appreciates their free spiritedness,
but doesn't like they're overly indulgent, overly.
Yeah, I think Nietzsche would say you have to be absolutely obsessed day and night with your aesthetic project. Let nothing get it in the way. Starve if you have to, as long as you get the thing done. And the Epicureans are like, no.
No, bro, like no. Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's exactly right.
They don't leave enough room for the will to power over other people and ultimately power over yourself.
Yeah.
Although I didn't even think of the word jouissance though, but this is like everyone else pretends they're not doing jouissance, and these guys just go, no, that's the law. This is it.
Yeah.
Yeah. One's mind goes to psychoanalysis, I think, more when reading Epicureanism than reading Stoicism, because Stoicism from that perspective just seems like pure repression, which would be a problematic reading, but it does seem like that. You're not controlling your emotions, you're repressing your emotions.
That was my fear, and actually I wish I would have used that language in our Stoicism episode, because I think that's exactly one of my worries with it. It feels repressive.
Yeah, there's there is another place to go with this, because we've kind of focused on like individual decisions and all that, but there's a lot of society being illusion or illusory, or setting up all these rat races. How does that happen, and how does everyone buy into it? I think the Epicurean answer is a little bit too simple, just saying, well, that's all a lie, and everyone's falling for it. And everyone's falling for it because they're stupid. Now that could be correct, and it might be just that simple. But I think they're maybe missing how much in their analysis of pleasure. There might be missing how much pleasure we get from illusion itself. Maybe
that's a good point.
Instead of just from truth, they're focused on how much pleasure we get from truth, but there's no mention of how much pleasure we get from illusion.
That's a good point, which makes sense at the time, because. Not that there wouldn't have been like ways of discussing that, but I do feel like the modern age there's so much more, I guess, awareness of like layer upon layer of ideology and like propaganda. There must have been people back then who were talking about things. Well, I guess it would have been, the sophists would be like the closest thing to like the propagandist or something. But
Epicureanism basically died out or was absorbed into aspects of Christian humanism, especially, but in general, the Christianity is obviously hostile to this, saying that there's no God, there's no other world, that there's no law.
Yeah, that's always been the interesting thing about these materialistic philosophies, is that they've always been very trenchant, a source of disquiet throughout the Christian period. They fed into, there's been materialistic movements and closely connected usually with like atheism and free thinking and like libertarianism in the old sense. And even in Marx, right? Studying Democritus and Epicurus and his dissertation back in his university days, and finding things to appreciate in the early materialists and finding inspiration for his own positions.
Yeah, I'm again confident in saying that the worst of the Greek philosophies, the worst of the Athenian philosophies won.
Yeah. I like Aristotle.
I think the other thing we said at the beginning, though, is that like Epicureanism seems so right because it's so much like scientific materialism today as well. It has those parallels.
And not even its metaphysical claims, though. I feel like it just rings true. It's weird. It's almost spooky how true it rings to me.
Well, yeah, not just the atomism, not just the lack of telos, but that certainly helps. The atheism, it does have the hallmarks of like a very modern way of thinking. I think all those things together, and then just looking at pleasure as like the highest good. Being like,
God, imagine a world where Epicureanism had won. Imagine what the world would look like.
Well, actually, I'm just looking at Wikipedia right now. There's a book called The Swerve, and it's how the world became modern. And it looks like from the summary that the claim is that the rediscovery of Lucretius's book, because Lucretius wasn't read and Epicureanism wasn't read for like over 1,000 years. And then a random monk in the, 15th century went to a monastery in Germany and found a random copy of Lucretius's on nature.
De Rerum Natura, right?
And then supposedly this sparked the Renaissance and a whole bunch of stuff. This is just from the summary. I haven't read it.
That's a wild claim.
Yeah. And it says it won a Pulitzer Prize for general nonfiction. So it's a pop philosophy book. It'd be
what's it called?
The Swerve.
The Swerve, eh? Interesting. Maybe I'll get it on Audible.
Stephen Greenblatt. So it's interesting. It's interesting to think that after the Dark Ages, which was scholastic Aristotelianism, then they rediscovered some Epicurean atomism, and we're like, oh shit, everything we're doing is bullshit. Let's go back to the simple pleasures of sculpting and painting.
Stephen Greenblatt is a major 20th century literary theorist who's part of the New Critical School. And I think he was one of the ones who published the New Historicism. That's the school he's associated with, although he wouldn't call it that, I think.
Well, if it's true, then this is a key swerve in the history of the West, is the rediscovery of Epicureanism.
Hashtag
yeah,
Swerve.
I guess so.
Good place to wrap it up. Hashtag Swerve, hashtag modernity.
Be interesting. Yeah.
I feel like no one actually does hashtags anymore. It's actually, I'm realizing it actually
dates you.
It totally, yeah, exactly. It actually makes me seem like a clear millennial and not at all a Zoomer.
I don't know.
Swerve.
I don't know. Skibbity toilet. Is that?
All right.
Well, that was fun.
I'm on the fence, boys.
Eric is he's just too attached to his principles. He's too attached to his principles, which are really just jouissance, but he wants to say they're really about principles.
Yeah, if you want to be actually courageous, it would be more courageous to say, I'm sticking to my principles, even though they have no basis and they don't even exist.
Yeah.
I'm a little too high-minded for all this pleasure nonsense.
Yeah, exactly.
I am epicurious about the cynics, though, I must say.
All right. Stay tuned. See you then, everyone.
All right.
Did you stop it?